Hello and welcome back to Adventures Through the Mind. This is a podcast that explores topics relevant and related to psychedelic culture, medicine, spirituality, and research, and always with the underlying question of how can we work with and through our psychedelic experiences to become better people, not just for ourselves, but for all those with whom we are nested in relationship, presently and across time, human and non-human alike. I'm your host, as always, James W. Jesso. Today's interview is going to explore the intersections of music and beauty and creativity and psychedelic experiences and music for mushrooms, as says the title of this episode. Our guest is Krishna Trevor Oswald, also known as East Forest. East Forest is a musician and documentary filmmaker exploring the intersection of music, consciousness, and psychedelic experience. His ambient / neoclassical / electronic compositions are designed as sonic tools for inner journeys and consciousness expansion. As you'll hear about in the beginning of the interview, the album that really touched me that East was a part of was an album that featured recordings of Baba Ram Dass, who you may or may not know about if you've been participating in the sort of psychedelic / spirituality cultural movement over the last 30 plus years. You've probably at least come in contact with Ram Dass. And he was someone that was very special for me and still is. His work is very special for me. So that album has also been quite special for me. So it was really a pleasure to have him on the show. Outside of that album with Ram Dass, he is also the creator of the soundtrack for the Psychedelic Practitioner series, which has 3 volumes. His latest release, Lovingly Volume 3, is a 6-hour immersive album recorded and improvised live inside of psilocybin ceremonies throughout 2020 to 2024. His music has been used in UCSF psilocybin research studies and in collaboration with WavePath's Usona and Johns Hopkins Neuroaesthetics Project. His first volume in that series, Music for Mushrooms, reached number 1 on iTunes in 2019. He is also behind the recent documentary from this year, maybe it was late last year, called Music for Mushrooms, which is kind of about what you would right away assume it is about. And it is a beautiful journey of a documentary. And we're going to talk about it a little bit at the beginning and the end of the interview that you're about to hear. The bulk of it is going to explore, like I said at the beginning, music, psilocybin experiences, creativity, beauty, content consumption versus active listening, and a number of other topics that if you are someone who enjoys music, enjoys being moved by music, or the inner journeys music can take us on, or is someone who can appreciate the beauty of a psilocybin experience and the music, the impact the music can have on you, I think this interview is going to be at least interesting for you, if not very. I think this interview is going to be one that you enjoy. So I won't say too much more about the documentary here in the intro, since we're going to talk about it in the interview a couple of times. But I will say that you can check it out at musicformushrooms.com, and I will be sure to include a link to that in the description to this episode. I'll also say before we get into the interview that East Forest is presently on tour and will be doing several shows throughout the course of November. So if you're listening to this pretty shortly after it was released in mid-October 2025, then you have an opportunity to go be a part of one of his sonic journeys. And I'll leave a link to information about that also in the description to this episode. Finally, he has a new album coming out at the beginning of November, which is the music from his Lovingly album with some guided meditations, and I'll leave a link to that as well. I'll also leave a link to the album that I was really moved by with East Forest, of course, but with Ram Dass. And yeah, all of those links are in the description or jameswjesso.com. And without any further ado, here is my interview with East Forest on Adventures to the Mind, episode 201. Enjoy. East Forest, welcome to Adventures Through the Mind.
Thank you very much.
So let me give you a little sort of background of me and my relationship to your music, which is that I didn't really know that I had a relationship to your music because I had heard it here and there, but not really knowing until a friend of mine recommended to me, hey, have you heard this Ram Dass album from East Forest? And I'm like, I haven't. And so I listened to this album one night, and I wasn't really intending to make it anything particularly special, but I wanted to really give it a chance because Ram Dass has a special place in my life, or has had a special place in my life. So I wanted to give his words this opportunity. So I was kind of going about my business, but I was dedicated. Like, this is the thing I'm doing. I'm listening to this album. I might be doing other stuff, but I'm not checking my phone. I'm not pausing it. I'm taking it from the beginning to the end. And I get to the track, I Am Loving Awareness. And at that time, in the sort of listening, I was sitting down and I realized in that moment how much I had been holding in my life, the stress, a lot of pain, a lot of sadness. And I just began weeping. Your music, Ram Dass's words. I think it took like 4 or 5, or maybe it was like the 6th time that he said, I am loving awareness. And it just like, it just clicked. It hit me. And after that, I went back and started listening to your other stuff and realized, oh, I've heard your music in a bunch of different places in these meaningful experiences, which of the quality we're going to be talking about today, and in other places, and having never known and realizing like, oh, I've had a relationship with this person's music now for years, having never known where it was from that these meaningful and important musical experiences were coming. And so it was a very cool moment of coming to know you in that way, or at least your work in that way. So I felt like sharing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's kind of the sneak attack coming at people from different directions. They don't realize it maybe sometimes, but yeah, the I'm Loving Awareness track was on the Ram Dass record. That was in 2018 when I was recording that. I remember I was in the basement over here because when I first started coming up here in Boise, Idaho, this is my wife's, at that time, my girlfriend's place. And I didn't really have a place to work. I remember so I was just sort of like down in this little crappy desk in her basement. And I remember working on the I Am Loving Awareness track. And it just felt special when it was coming together. And I just thought it was funny how I was in such non-beautiful, cool surroundings putting that track together. But that was a fun journey. It was fun to get Krishna Das on it too, because the two of them hadn't been on a track together, as far as I know, like a recorded track of music. So they're sort of, and they're longtime old brothers. So it's cool to have them weaving between each other.
Mm. So I'm not sure what the segue is here, but I'm going to try to invent one around, what it is about music that allows this kind of thing to happen. Like, even you're talking about this, the environment that you're in seems so different than the music that you're cultivating, which is coming from within you. It's coming from your relationship to the work of these two individuals and their words and their impact on you. And so I want to start off with a question that, much of my questions today were based in just listening to your music, watching music for mushrooms, hearing your thoughts on this kind of work, and wanting to probe into sort of larger questions, starting with what I think is a very large question, which is, what is music?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
These are things that I was somewhat exploring, or was a lot of the impetus for the movie you referenced that we made, Music for Mushrooms. And with that film, which, by the way, right now is just at musicformushrooms.com for folks who want to check it out. It's something that is integral to the human experience. And it seems like it's been a fundamental part of what it means to be human as long as we've been humans, and not just for like social cohesion and meaning, but also it is this malleable tool that can help us guide through different dimensions of altered states of consciousness. And it's like a bird song to us. It's something very innate to us. We all have voice boxes and can sing. Why is that? Why why do we interpret music and what it is emotionally? Because essentially it's just dealing in metaphor and emotions. And I'm really glad it's here. But in that way, it feels like a translator of non-dual spaces, or it's sort of a bridge to things that are beyond just the corporal world.
So I imagine this comment around it being a bridge to the non-corporeal world, it's going to come in a little bit more with a later question, so I won't necessarily follow up to it right now. I want to dive in a little bit more locally with that question of what is music. So what is music for you as someone who produces music, and as we'll get into later in the episode, produces music that is tailored towards supporting people and psychedelic experiences? What is music to you? Its essence, its place in your life, its meaning, its value, etc.
I mean, for me, it's just something that I have to do to keep my head on straight. It's a lifesaver. Like it's by doing it, I seem to be able to exercise some kind of creative muscle that's important for me to feel mentally fit. So in that way, it's a lifeline. And I've stumbled into that and through it my whole life, from doing music as a kid in school, public schools, like all of school. I did tons of just anything music related. But I didn't start writing my own music until 2000. Well, I guess 1999 to 2000, something like that. But that's when it really started to change into another zone of just developing a skill set to be able to perform it or to record it. And that's a never ending journey. And I often reference the book like The War of Art, which talks a lot about this idea of resistance, and every day is a new start. And you kind of, in a sense, go to battle with this resistance that says you don't need to do any of this stuff, which sounds crazy, but it's totally there. And it's just something that I have to face and work with, because I've just learned the hard way that being engaged with music in one form or another is really helpful for me just to survive and to have meaning in life. So for me, it's essential, I guess, whether I fight it or not.
And maybe this is going too personal, so you can no, you can no stop doing any question you like. But you said to survive and like life saving. Do you mean that figuratively, in the sense of just like having a good life, or do you mean that literally in some way?
I both. I mean, I really know for myself that if I'm not engaged in some kind of creative expression, it doesn't have to be music, but music's a very malleable or direct way for me to do it. And I'm doing it a lot because it's my job, that I just have like, it keeps me from being in depression. Like it really just helps the day have meaning. And it's like a vitamin or an energy that's passed through you that it just, whether your mind knows this or not, it absolutely, I've seen the evidence over and over again of how that nourishes me. And if I don't do it, how it's kind of like a monkey on my back, where I'm always kind of thinking about that, or I recognize that I didn't get to it. And then if that piles up day after day or week after week, I can get into some real trouble there, where life just seems like it doesn't have much meaning. And I think that's because creativity is a direct connection to creation, and we're meant to be creative beings. But for me, something happens when it could be anything from, making up a song or even just rehearsing and playing music. It just does something. It just changes how I think and feel very directly.
Is there I mean, the answer to this is a very obvious yes. Is there a difference between music and sound? Right. But I guess my question is more like, what do you see as the difference? Like, what makes sound music? Is it just math? Or like, I think you just referenced, creativity as being in connection with creation. But what makes sound music just math, or is there something deeper happening there for us as humans, or maybe beyond us?
Well, I mean, in some ways, I listen to nature field recordings that I record, and like to me, I guess it's a kind of music. It's the chaos of all those things happening and how there's something cohesive there that is beautiful to me. Yet it's not quite the same, I suppose, as human-made music. And I think it's that human element, that that element of whatever we bring to it, all the little choices that we're able to make to combine in infinite ways to make songs. And so in some ways, it's a kind of structure, or it's choices that we make, but it's the human hand that makes it music. There's, we define it as music as humans, and I think it's the humanness.
Hmm. You mentioned beauty, and I was going to ask this question in a few questions from now, but I'll go in. I'll go in now. Your music is beautiful and complex, and in its beauty, and so is, I also, I can be out in the forest listening to the various sounds of nature, and I also hear music in that. Um, and so I'm wondering, what is beauty? Why do you think it is that when we encounter something beautiful, and I'll go back to my experience of listening to your track that had Krishna Das and Ram Dass on it, is that it was beautiful and there was joy in that for me, but it also woke up sadness and grief, and
Mm.
not as separate feelings, but as like this full, this almost like gestalt of feelings that included sadness, and it included happiness, and it included joy and gratitude and grief and all of these things. What do you think it is about what beauty is, and what it is about music that can bring beauty alive in us, or the perception of beauty alive in us? Or maybe that's not the direction, but this is the question. It's about beauty and music and the rich emotional complexity that can be in both.
I mean, I can't say why it works, but I can say that that seems to be the reason for its existence. Like its entire language is emotional. And so the point of it is to feel things. And that's why I was calling it a translator or a bridge, or it works in metaphor with a non-dual, because that's what it's good at, is engendering emotional states. And in that way, it's telling a kind of story about the human condition, and it's a companion for us. But in the psychedelic spaces, it's that in a way that's so amplified that, I mean, synesthetically, in a sense, you can become the music can become physical spaces, uh, of course, colors and visuals, but it's kind of like it seems to be a multi-tool that is coming down from higher or other dimensional spaces that just functions also in the three-dimensional space as well. And so we're used to just dealing with it in this world, but it is so easy for it to help us expand into deeper layers of being and understanding and knowing and gnosis. And yeah, I mean, thank God. Like this life would be a lot more pedantic without it.
Mm. So we're talking about, I mean, I entered us into this conversation referencing this really beautiful song that you produce, and it's really important, meaningful impact on me. And we're talking about the kind of music that can be in psychedelic experiences and ceremonial psychedelic experiences. We're talking about the music of nature. But music is a much broader thing. The kinds of music, qualities of music can be broad in their genre and in their impact. Like when I sit down and listen to an album that you've produced, I have a very different experience than when I sit down and listen to like Lorna Shore, like just like really heavy metal, like, a different kind of experience than when I sit down and listen to, say, lo-fi hip hop or uh, R&B from the late 70s or something. So there's a lot of different kinds of music that has come through the human experience over time. And in the midst of that, industry has arisen, and out of industry, there's money, and out of money, there can be contortions of art that don't always align with this deeper thing that you're talking about, especially when things get heavily commercialized and become, say, like contorted by this is, my opinion, sort of contorted by the consumer capitalist engine to become products for sale rather than something maybe that is from this deeper place. Now, I'm making a lot of assumptions, and feel free to check each one of them if you don't feel like I'm going a little off base. But the reason I'm saying this is because I recently watched this movie called Sinners. It's like new in the theaters right now, and it has a really heavy sort of like inclination towards music, particularly blues music from the sort of like deep south of the 30s, I believe. And part of the narrative of this movie includes sort of music bringing us together in this ancient way. And there's a scene in it, which I won't describe for people who don't want to have it ruined, where music and dance is coming together in a way that it struck me that it was missing in my life, in a way that maybe it was kind of there before, but it made me wonder if it's just missing in the sort of deluge of music that just happens in our lives all the time because of just the advancement of audio technology, production technology, the market of music, etc. And I'm wondering if you also, or in a different way, perceive that humanity might have lost contact with something in music that previously we had a better hold of and isn't as present now in the music most of us encounter, or how we encounter that music.
Yeah, I mean, most obviously, we consume more than we create. And before the advent of recorded music, of course, 100 some plus years ago, we only created largely, and we gathered around and sang songs, or we were probably engaged in it in some way. And that was very natural and normal. So now we're mostly just paying other people to do it for us and listening to it, or maybe not even paying for it at all, but we're consuming. And then there's so much of it. Just that's pretty different. I mean, it's more present than it's ever been any time in human history, in our lives, in the world, whether background music or just songs on the phone and in entertainment things we watch. It's everywhere. In cars, while on the go. But it's also more unconscious, and I think the direct engagement with it. So, yeah, the biggest thing is people aren't actually recognizing that they're musicians too. Whether they think they're any good at it, they are. And so they've abdicated that responsibility over to quote unquote professionals, and that's a big difference. And then we're in like a peak content phase. I think we're moving towards that with AI very rapidly, and soon we'll be in a place where perhaps all of these different industries and ways we deal with music is completely saturated, and it's almost a moot point what role humans even play in it at all. And it's an open question how much humans care about other humans making things that are difficult to make. That will depend right there on the survival of a lot of artists as far as professionally speaking. And maybe then it would move back to where people are only making music hyper locally, like literally for themselves and their family and their friends, because they can stumble upon the fact that they enjoy that. But the vast majority of people would be just as pleased listening to an artificial created song. I mean, literally every minute or every day, whatever, you could wake up, instead of having your release radar once a week, it's sort of like, these are the songs we wrote for you today that we think you'll like. And for the average person, you probably will like them, and maybe it's even connected to like what you need. Like you had bad sleep, or so you need a little energy, or
It's
you're
like
feeling a little
integrated
down.
in all of your metrics,
Yeah,
historical and bio. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, why not? Just Apple Watch or Oura Ring or whatever. I'm not saying I want any of this, but I could see all this happening because it's just an extension of like the Spotify DJ thing they have now. It's just stupid, where it's just like an AI voice saying things between songs. But that's what they're going for and starting to go in this direction of. But they're already like getting in the direction of having AI artists and pretending they're not AI artists, so they don't have to pay them,
Hmm.
and shoving them into playlists. And even some of the labels, major labels, are starting to look at like having their own AI artists, which is also somewhat ridiculous. But that even goes into like, will people care if, from a like a branding or a fame point of view, if the person or thing AI that they're admiring as an artist isn't even human anymore? And some of that's already happening on social media, where it's bots talking to bots, or fully artificial people, so to speak.
Well, I mean,
And
it's in some respect, people have long since dehumanized the objects of their fame. They're no longer people; they're this other thing in their
yeah,
mind, right? So,
well, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, we've sort of been teeing this up for a long time. I mean, Trump is part of that in a way. He's kind of literally a TV character. Uh,
literally a pro wrestler at one point.
yeah, and that's so
Yeah.
in many ways he was this fantasy thing that we're continuing to fantasize about. And for some people, they prefer that in a way. They've turned it into an entire universe and reality. So it's just, we made all this stuff,
Hmm.
and we're giving it power and more. We're just pushing it forward in the name of shareholder prices, essentially corporate structure. And so, for better or worse, how did that gets back to this conversation about music. Um, I think it will profoundly change things when music, as any other art form or any other thing, like what does it mean for human culture when things that are typically quite difficult to do become very simple and easy? How will we value them? Certainly, let alone 5, 10 years, but a few generations from now, when people don't even know, you know, of course, certain people will still want to sing and write songs and do it because they like it. Just, I like doing it. But, um, yeah, it'd be a really, shall we say, interesting turn, and I can feel this concrescence that we're sort of heading towards very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's, like you talked about, everyone is a musician, like everyone can sing, right? Whether or not a person will consider, somebody else listening will consider that a technical accomplishment in their singing or not is irrelevant. Everyone, if they've got a voice, they can sing. If they've got a body, they can dance. If their dance is just within them because their physical body can't move, it's still there. There's a kind of creation act. I'm wondering, in talking about, beauty and the value of music in society, or, the deluge of content, some of which we recognize as music, some of that not even made by humans. Is there a kind of perceiver role? Like, okay, so you talked about we consume more than we create. Is there a kind of creative act in listening that awakens something in music that is a part of this puzzle here?
Yeah. Yeah. I break it down between active listening and passive listening. And active listening is not a special skill. It just is about putting our attention with a sense of curiosity, or even more simple and more radical, is you're doing one thing at a time. So these days, that's pretty radical. You're just listening, and there's no wrong way to listen. But you're putting your attention, you're giving it to that thing so that it can fully speak to you. And just doing that can be pretty profound. I think we're in a place where music is largely consumed pretty passively. Like that's sort of a business model for a lot of Spotify and so forth. This idea of background playlists, and that has its place. But if you really want to get the most out of it, yeah, you just have to. And I've done these meditations. Actually, that we have these little courses as part of the movie Music for Mushrooms. We have this toolkit, it's called. And in there is a guided meditation to teach you. Right, it's going to walk you through some music of mine. I'm like, this is what I'm doing, what I was going, my process, but it's teaching you like how you could listen to it actively and what that feels like.
Mm. I like that, what that feels like, because that seems to be what you're speaking to. It's in my experience as well. There's something in the music that it activates feelings in us. Like that's where we find the beauty and the value of it. It's not necessarily in the technicality, although the technicality plays an important role. And if you are a technically informed person, that might increase your ability to appreciate the music. But there's something in the feeling of it that is where, for myself, the
that's
value
all
is.
of it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole point of it, is just cultivating feeling. And feeling is really the real way of understanding. I think ideas are more on the surface or swimming around that. But the way we really process things and grow and truly understand is through feeling, is through the body. And that's the language of music.
As a little sort of like anecdotal aside, I think coming through the pandemic, music over the last few years of my life, there were events that happened that had a significant impact that were not positive necessarily, at least not yet in hindsight, or in hindsight, still not yet positive. And I lost my connection with music for a long time for reasons because of this. And not too long ago, a friend of mine who has recently started to fall in love with music had invested in some very high fidelity audio equipment and has started doing these gatherings. I'm actually going to one this evening. He calls the speaker circle, and it's friends getting together, and we each bring some songs that we like, and we each get a chance to play those songs in this high fidelity system. And through the time that the song is on, everybody is just listening.
Yeah,
Then when the song
fun.
is done, we talk about what happened for us. And here's the anecdote. We listened to a Nirvana song off Nevermind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've probably heard the song 100 times on the radio and so on and so forth. But listening to it on vinyl on this high fidelity system, deep listening, I felt like I heard it in a way I'd never heard it before. In a way that after this evening, I felt this rejuvenation of music because of this active listening, because of this even community gathering together to really like tune in to this and to awaken with me and like, oh, I've actually only just heard this song as miscellaneous content for the last 25 years, 30 years. And now I just, for the first time, really felt it as music. I suppose, again, since I was a teenager, because I listened to that stuff when I was a teen. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And that brings me into the psychedelic experience or brings us there, perhaps, if you want to follow me. There's something about the psychedelic experience that seems to put us more in tune with this capacity, this sort of receptive capacity to be in the music. Do you see that too? And how would you describe that? Like, how would you describe what it is about the psychedelic experience that brings us to music in this way?
Well, I think music has played a really primary role in guiding the psychedelic experience. And we can see this in evidence of ceremonies like Lakota sweat lodges or ayahuasca traditional ceremonies in the Icaros, in San Pedro ceremonies and the songs. There's many other examples, like where the music is the thing that's guiding the journey. And these songs get codified in a way within each tradition as a technology. It becomes the structure, the ceremony. And so that alone is showing us that things have been figured out over and over again for a very long time, that music becomes the doorway, the primary mechanism to navigate, communicate, understand, integrate with these medicines. I was told by a shaman of Peruvian descent, for instance, with ayahuasca, saying that the Icaros, the songs, are bringing forth the spirit of the ayahuasca versus the medicine itself. Like they need the songs to do that, to like bring out the spirit. So in that sense, they're like, it wouldn't work without it, or it wouldn't work in the way they've designed it. So in that way, I see it as fundamental. That's not to say you can't take psychedelics and not have music. I mean, you're always probably going to have sound, like we were talking about, of different shapes or sizes. But I think it really can unlock the fullest potential with music. And then when you're using music that's specifically designed for this space, it can lean into all sorts of characters or character and qualities that can be imbued into the music that just makes that experience even better. And most people don't know that because they've never experienced it. I mean, at best, I think some folks have experienced a playlist, which is an amalgamation of different songs from different artists. Very few have experienced like one artist with a bespoke piece that's taking you from beginning to end in a cohesive way that's actually designed for that space.
Hmm. And this is, I mean, I was, again, we'll maybe ask you a little bit more about this later, but this is something that you've done. Like you have an album specifically, Lovingly, which is that for people. And it's based on the timeline. It seems like it's more inclined towards something like mushrooms than something like LSD, being that it's like just shy of 7 hours. But you have done this both in a recorded fashion and as showcased in Music for Mushrooms. You have also done this in a dedicated improvised, like making this music happen in the real time experience of people's journeys. So I want to ask you more about that in a minute, but I want to maybe go a little bit more into what you said earlier. I can't remember the exact terminology, but that we get opened up to something, like something beyond us, with music and with the psychedelic experience, and collectively, like the two together working in tandem. Can you comment a little bit more on that? Like what is this thing that we're opening up to? And I guess in some sense, like what is the value of us even doing so?
I don't know how to put into words what we're opening up to. But the value, I mean, for the soul to grow, for understanding, for perspective, and for connection into sort of our roots or the source of our own consciousness. At least that's what the value is for me. And it's a kind of reminder in a way, reorientation to what is, what you find important so that you can make choices in your life that are in alignment with what you actually want, what you really want.
Hmm. Is there something beyond the self in there though? Like, is there something beyond that?
Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm saying, the roots or source, I'm saying all that is. So, I mean, in essence, you're breaking through the idea of individuality or separateness into the idea that everything is one thing and you're a part of that. Therefore, everyone else is part of that same thing too. But you always get distilled back down after a journey into your consciousness. And so it gets back to like, what choices are you going to make and do you want to make? And how are you going to curate your life and navigate your life?
Mm-hmm. You're now having been inspired, if such is that, then what and who do I want to be such that I can live with that knowledge, that
I mean,
understanding, those
hopefully,
lessons? Yeah.
but some people get stuck in delusion or self-aggrandizement or all sorts of things. I mean, it's not like it's a panacea in itself. It's just sort of an experience and showing you things, and then you have to do the work. And some folks take that in directions that are maybe create more separation or just more ego and division. We see a lot of that as the commercialization is happening.
The commercialization of psychedelics, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, which is inevitable. But I think it's something to keep a pretty strong awareness on if you're swimming in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I not infrequently get like emails from podcast guest agencies, and the sort of crux of the invitation is, this Fortune 500 CEO left banking after their ayahuasca experience, and now they're helping people transform their lives so that they can become hyper successful entrepreneurs and make their first million.
Yeah, to be more productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of it's inherently extractive to the world, and it's just the same story of separateness and commodification. And we're running out of things to commodify in the world too. So, I mean, there is an endpoint on that. It's just the resources of this planet, or the effects of commodifying those resources is more acute, like climate change and pollution and toxicity and plastics and so forth. And so even the political situation is all related, really. Um, and so on a certain level, we're being forced to transform. We're just not really doing it. We're kicking and screaming and all the things children do to rationalize and deny and lie and be like, that's not happening. Like, no, I don't believe you. No, I'm taking my ball. I'm going home. All these things.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Let's go there in a minute, because I do want to ask you about the sort of where all of this fits in the sort of context of the world right now, because that is something that is
Important.
sometimes, well, vitally
Yeah.
important. But I meant to your documentary, it is like in sort of implicit throughout, and at times explicitly a part of the topics of like where all of this like music and psychedelic experiences and stuff fit inside of the crises that we're facing right now as a species and as a planet. But first, I want to go back to the production of music, of a whole arc of music, not as a playlist, but as like a whole composed thing that leads somebody through a journey. I often found the documentary itself had that feel to it. It felt almost ceremonial just in the documentary, especially with the music and with the various sort of moments in nature and the various sort of people you were speaking with and how it was all showcased had a bit of that in it. And okay, so speaking of the documentary, I eventually did come up with questions, but for a while I thought to myself, I'm like, this is so beautiful. I'm feeling very moved. I'm tearing up. And I'm like, I don't have any questions for this guy. Like, I just wanted to hug you
Yeah,
and
you don't
thank
have to
you.
ask any questions about it. I mean, it's something that I really just want people to know about it and be able to see it because, to be honest, like we work so hard on it and we're really proud of it. And it has been strangely challenging to get it out. So as I mentioned, it's right as of now only at musicformushrooms.com is the only place you can see it or kind of rent it to watch. But I would love for more people to see it, largely because it's just the purpose of it is to inspire, to create feeling. It's not like we have an agenda of like, this is the thing we're trying to get you to understand and get you on board. It's not that. It's more like music in a sense where it's meant to just engender certain feelings. And through that, hopefully, you have revelations or inspiration that's important in your journey, that if it's aligned in that kind of truth of like the metaphysical truth of like we're all one thing, then we can start to get things in the direction we want to go. But I do believe it has to start from the individual, like from the inside out. And we need to be inspired, especially today. So the movies, like, and the backdrop of the whole film is like the collapse, essentially, right? And it's mirrored in my own struggles or how other people are sharing in the film in little stories here and there. But you keep seeing like images or of what's going on, which sadly will probably continue to go on for a while. And so I think that'll stay relevant. But that's like the thing lurking in the background that you can feel is like a wave, I think, coming. And I think we all can feel that right now. And so we wanted to make the movie to help people like put modern life into the context of like, how do we live more authentically and with grace, and like what does that look like, psychedelics or not?
Mm.
What role is music play in that? What role is psychedelics? What role is community, nature?
Mm. Well, for what it's worth, it it had that effect on me. So thank you for that.
Great.
Um, Now, I did eventually clearly come up with some questions. I had to take myself out of just being deeply moved and go back, up 6 inches, or not 6, like 15 inches, 12 inches to the other organ of perception. And uh, I thought to myself, and in a conversation with a friend of mine who was actually the first person to be like, hey, there's this documentary coming out called Music for Mushrooms. At the time, it was like up for like you could watch it for free for this 1 week. I think it was over the New Year time. And I was like, oh, great, I'll check this out. And I was talking with him about it and being like, having the realization that, be it your album Lovingly, be it the journeys that you have helped, like be the musical person for on your various tours, be it through like your album, your various albums, or through this documentary. I'm not the only person to be, like similarly emotionally affected by your work. And so this is a question, I guess, directly for you as an artist. What does it feel like to be the soundtrack for such meaningful experiences in people's lives?
Well, I would think whatever you're feeling when you said you felt emotional listening to a particular song or the film, I mean, that's the same thing I'm feeling. And I'm just very interested personally in feeling those things, because what else is there to do? There's a time and place, of course, for the jubilant or or all these different feelings. And I do feel that my music as a whole has a diversity of that. Like, I think I get lumped in a lot with ambient or like really, I guess if you had to paint a really broad brush, people would be like, oh, I think of East Forest as very calming or introspective. And a lot of it is that way, but not all of it is. But there is a glue, I think, that holds it all together, that has to do with, I just want to feel connected to something real and something like what's beneath the surface. And so we get in our to-do lists, or we get in whatever it is, the things that take us, we get wrapped up in. That, of course, is not like the point of life. That's just like the mechanics of life. And it's a way for me to, especially in such a modern life with all the things and notifications and screens, a way for me to through feeling, feel like alive in a way that feels more true or real. And nature can do that, that's why I like to be in nature. It's because I have these moments where I'm like, I can just see things or feel things, or I'm in it, where it's humbling, really, in a way. All of that is a humbling exercise into getting unattached as much. So the fact that like I can record that, I've been recording music. Oh geez, I'm gonna date myself, but it's like since I think I released my first thing in 2001. And then I was making little 4 tracks and little things like that before that. But as far as like putting out a record, and this was pre East Forest, and East Forest has been since 2008. So that's 17 years. And that's a long time. So naturally, I've just, because of all that time, I've recorded a lot of different things or done different performances. And in that body of work, it's great that there's some things that people are still like, they find a similar solace in that. Like there's really no better compliment. I obviously I don't hear about that except for like when someone says something to me, but day to day, it's quite isolating because I'm just here making stuff and living my life. And I'm not on social media a lot. And so I don't, I meet people at shows or retreats or when we were touring the film around. And I do hear a lot about like stories of how the music wove in someone's life, and it just played a role in an important process for them. And that's always it's just really beautiful. it's not about credit or anything. It's like, wow, that's so cool how that helped like give you a little nudge, and then this thing happened with your brother and you really needed that, and that's nothing to do with me, that what's going on in their life. So in that way it feels like an entity in itself, that you package up this little boat and you kick it off to sea, and you're like wave goodbye to it, and then it has a life of its own. Like it's out there interacting. That's not me. And that's so neat to hear the stories of like, oh, it washed up on your shore. You had this thing, and then it went back out to sea.
What ended up inspiring you explicitly? Well, the phrase could mean two things. I don't mean your documentary by the same name. But what inspired you to start making music specifically for mushrooms?
Well, I had had a few experiences in my life. The first mushroom experience was in college, and I was 19, I believe. And that was my first psychedelic. And it was profound in a good way, thank God. But I had a classic journey where time broke down and my sense of self started to break down. I really went through it. And so when I came out of that, this is really before the internet's kick in, there was not much information about like what happened. I was like, what? I don't understand. I really truly didn't understand. But it felt realer than real, and it felt very, very important. Very important. And in some ways, I think I was chasing that experience, maybe still am, ever since then. But I didn't have any guides or teachers in that way. And so I would dabble with diving into mushroom experiences in the ensuing, let's say, 10 years, here and there. And sometimes, but not having any knowledge about structure or maybe what would help. And there were times where I was listening to music. Let's say there were half a dozen of these times where I would slip into these states of being with the music and the mushrooms and everything, where it was just like, wow. It's like truly, it's like, yep, that's the thing, or whatever it is. And there it is. And that inspired me in a very, very deep way. And then when things were falling apart more in 2008 in my life, and also as Occupy Wall Street, for the first time the world almost fell apart in that generation, which feels quite quaint at this point. But I started making music really out of a kind of desperation that was just for myself to feel those things. It's like, well, maybe I can almost reverse engineer it. What if I just tried, now the internet's a little more active, what if I tried to learn about what's going on with sound healing, see what I can learn? There wasn't a lot out there, but any scientific paper, or I would meet with people who were in that field and ask them questions about the music. And then I was doing more indigenous ceremonies and being invited, and that was new to me too. But I was very much learning experientially from what people were doing with music in those spaces by being a participant. Everything from the sweat lodges to ayahuasca to San Pedro, and some others. So all of this was happening, and I was also getting back into backpacking for the first time since I was a kid in Boy Scouts. And at the time, I was living in New York City, and I was going up to the Adirondacks and really getting into sound and the sounds of nature and recording it. And all this was just happening. And so, I mean, I don't even totally remember your exact question, but I mean, something about like, how did I get the idea? I mean, the idea kind of came back to me, and I started making music because I felt like I needed to feel some kind of connection. And intuitively, I was getting that by giving up any desire to do anything with this music, like commercially. I almost thought it was impossible. I didn't think you could perform it. And it was purposely not any genre. I was just like, none of that matters. Like, I just want to do it. It'll fit this purpose of helping me feel that thing potentially in that space. And boy, did it. I did a journey with it when I was all done, and it completely transformed my life. And that was like a huge surprise. And then from there, everything just sort of unfolded.
Was there a part of you that was like, did you continue to make the music being like, oh, that's now that felt even meaningfully. Like you said, it transformed your life. Like, I want to keep making music because this was so important to me? Or was there a part that was explicitly like, I want to make music. I want my music to be able to offer this to others as well? Was there like an explicit sense of wanting to bring your music into the mushroom space for others? Or did that just kind of happen to come along later, just as a natural evolution of making the music?
It was both. I mean, I did send it out. I had this profound experience and I started just giving it away for free. I mean, back then there were CDs and there wasn't streaming. So I was giving it away. I even like registered my first album with the Library of Congress. So it'd be like a Creative Commons. I was really
Cool.
dedicated to that. And I did send it to places like NPR and I remember I got a little press. I got into South by Southwest. I mean, things that were all the things I wanted before in my music career I could never attain. And now it was like I'm making this weird genreless music and people like it. But it was really, really early days. But it's mostly my friend Lewis who started setting up circles for me to play for, to guide Mushroom Journeys with the album, but to play around it because we needed more material essentially. And he just kept doing that. And so that was very much answering a calling that for years and years and years. And, he ended up being the producer on the film. So we're still work together, my oldest collaborator. But if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure I would have developed it into a live thing because it didn't function in like the traditional music system at that time, at least.
Like, it wasn't concert music. It wasn't
Or
like the
I
kind
didn't
of
think. I was
show.
like, well, what would I even do? I just have this album. I'm like, it's all experimental and I didn't even know how I would perform it. Before that, I had a band. I was doing more traditional, like indie pop stuff. So technologically, I wasn't even sure what that would look like. So I started looping and weaving in, trying to figure out how to get the field recordings. And it was a very, very slow, organic process of coming up with a live sound. And then through that, I would record these ceremonies that I was doing, and that became my next couple records, was just recordings from those improvisations of the ceremonies with this live looping setup. And that was things like an album called Crystal Starship. It's a very old ceremony record of mine. And then it moved into like Music to Die To, Music to Be Born To. And I didn't make another studio record like my first record. So the one I'm referencing is called The Education of the Individual Soul. And that was that first record that I made for myself. So it didn't really get back into like the studio thing for a while. And ever since then, it's gone back and forth where I make some studio records like the Ram Dass record, but then I also have these ceremony records like the Lovingly album that's very specifically not only from the ceremony spaces where it's recorded and improvised live, but it's for that. Now people listen to it and use it for all sorts of things or different medicines, and that's great. That's fine. But it's very like purpose-built music.
I want to take a little break from the interview and make a request. The request is that if you are finding any kind of value, engagement, entertainment, edutainment in this show, to take a moment and subscribe or leave a positive review or comment on your favorite podcatcher app. These comments, reviews, subscriptions, they positively sort of nudge the algorithm that tells people what they should or shouldn't listen to, or what they may or may not like, that they may also like this show. And as a small podcaster, small content creator, without much of a team and certainly not a budget for SEO and promotion, your word of mouth engagement, even as little as likes and reviews, really do go a long way. So I deeply appreciate you taking the time to subscribe and review. If you'd like to take a step beyond that and actively support the production of this show, which includes both hard investment materials such as buying lights, cameras, software, which is all through subscription now, and literally keeping the lights on, and the soft expenses of time and energy that goes into producing the show, I would love it if you became my patron on Patreon. Patreon is a membership platform that allows you to pledge an amount once a month that helps to contribute to the finances, to the expenses, hard and soft, to produce the show. And this show is my main income. And it really does mean a lot when you sign up. It really literally affects my life. It literally directly affects how much money I have to pay for rent, for food, for equipment, and all the rest. It really makes a big difference. So even as little as a couple of dollars once a month does go a long way collectively. So please consider signing up. You can also sign up for free if you are on Patreon and you would like to just stay in the loop with what I'm producing, and but not necessarily with the funds to contribute financially. If you'd like to just toss me a tip for this episode, you can do so through PayPal or Ko-Fi. Maybe it's pronounced coffee, not sure. Links to that are going to be in the description to this episode, wherever you're checking it out. So please do that. But otherwise, head to patreon.com/James, WJESO, to check out the options for becoming a member of my Patreon. Thank you so much. And with thanks in mind, I'd like to offer my deep thanks to the patrons I presently have. If you're listening now, you make this podcast possible financially, hard and soft, like I said. I couldn't be doing this without your support. The world is a complicated economic place right now. My life has gotten unfortunately complicated economically due to events that transpired that were beyond my control. And you continuing to stick with me if you've been around for a long time or choosing to have signed up recently really makes a big difference. I'm so grateful. Thank you for helping me be able to do this thing that I love as my job, as the way that I earn a living. Thank you. The people whose names are listed on the screen here on YouTube or in the description to this episode, wherever you're checking it out, you know who you are. Now the world knows who you are. I mean, your first name at least. Thank you so much for giving a boosted amount beyond the sort of baseline, and the credits are thank you for that. Now, without me losing the plot on what I'm saying here and rambling off for too long, I will cut it short. Sure, I'll cut it less than any longer and welcome you all back into the interview from here. So thanks, and let's get back into our interview with East Forest. In the midst of a ceremony, there are lots of things happening, right? There's lots of like the psychedelics. I'll speak specifically to mushrooms, but of course it applies to others as well. The mushrooms, they open us in a lot of ways. They open us to ourselves. They open us to the world around us, to the touch of the world around us in a very deep and vulnerable place, which includes others that we're with and something beyond us. And you had also talked about how creativity seems to tap us into that as well. So we're being touched by deep within ourselves, the world around us, the people we're with, something beyond that, the music and the space. And there's a dynamic that happens, right? I assume that when you're up there doing the music, there's that dynamic happening for you as well. I'm not trying to infer that you are on the mushrooms. That's not what I mean. What I'm trying to speak to is you go into a state that I assume isn't just for the other people in the room. It's maybe with. And I'm curious if you could talk to that a little bit. Like, what is happening for you when, and I think it's an old jazz term, but like when you're in the pocket of this kind of ceremonial space with music and with mushrooms, like what comes alive there?
Well, it's like waves that come and go, and riding those waves is probably more the skill or the art, more like that when it's feeling like you're not on a wave, that and riding through that. But when you're in spaces where it feels very in the flow, or basically it's almost like you cultivate these spaces with the loops and so forth, and it can take a while for that to form. And even then, it oftentimes, especially in the psilocybin space, because you have so much time, you're time rich, that it can sort of shift again and again, and it gets into these beds in a way of music that you can play with and continue to morph. And that can be a really exciting space because there's nothing I like more than we're in a place where everyone's giving you their attention, and subtlety can play out, and nuance, like really detailed small things can go a long way. And I'm hearing in my, I use in-ears like these, so I'm hearing like the detail, and I want that to be translated out into the room, hopefully in a very similar way. But that's what's in the recording. It's just a direct input of like essentially what I'm hearing, which is just the mix. And all those little details can, they can just be so amplified within the psychedelic space. And it's a lot of fun. Like it's a joyful experience, is that sort of idea of following your bliss. You're just kind of following creatively like the thing that feels beautiful, and like then this thing, and oh, this thing could drop in. Oh, what if I took this out? Oh, so you're very much in that space of following these little ideas that are coming. And because you've almost earned it, you've made it into this space. And now you're like, oh, we get to play in this space for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And that's a real joy.
When you
Sometimes
say
even where
we, sorry, you finish your
well,
thought. Yeah.
me and whoever's in the room, because we're cultivating it by them giving their attention to the space. That allows me, that is what unlocks the potential for this to happen.
Right, because that was my question. That was what I was about to lead with when I asked about we. Is like, is this just you creating and people listening, or is there like a deeper dynamic that's happening there between you and the other participants, and something beyond that as well?
There's definitely a more integrated dynamic. I mean, even in shows where it's not like a small psilocybin ceremony, like it's the public, it's the same thing. Like the role of the audience is very participatory in helping create what happens on that stage, because it's like a leaky balloon. If one person or a small group is chattering or whatever it is, it's very difficult energetically as a performer to like rise above that without tuning it out. But now you're kind of like blocking it off in a way. And so things happen. We all feel it, I think, when we've been at concerts where something just feels locked in. And it's very much a conversation, with the artist and the audience that creates this third thing that is the music itself, or like the energetic field that we're all creating together.
Which I assume includes, this is my terminology, run with if you like, but it also includes the intelligence of the mushroom as well, assuming that, that it's in a mushroom
In the
ceremony.
mushroom ceremonies, yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, one of my hopes or goals is that I am getting out of the way so that they can speak through me, and I'm just a messenger or a go-between. Many times I've listened to, like, when I put together the Lovingly album, for instance, it's the third in my series of these guidance records. The first one was called Music for Mushrooms, same as the movie. But next one was called In, and then the third is Lovingly. And I'm basically curating music that's been played in these ceremonies over the years, 4 or 5 years. And you'll hear songs sometimes where I'm like, what is this? Like, where did that come from? I played it once. I'd have to sit here and try to chart it out and figure out what I was doing to play it again. And it is kind of confounding, where does any art come from? That's amazing. And so we are wanting to open some kind of doorway where something can flow through.
Okay, I'm gonna invite us to go here. We'll see if you take it. What is the intelligence of the mushroom such that you're trying to get out of its way to speak through you in the music?
I don't want to try to reduce it, because I think anything I would say would be a word salad that is that. And the truth is, I can't say exactly. I could say things, I can dance around it. But at the end of the day, it's a feeling that it's vast. It's so vast and powerful, just out of respect for it, that I'm like, all I can say is it feels exponentially I don't even know if intelligence is the right word, but capable, integrated, or the depth of it than what we experience just in our minds. But the way I think we touch it, or touch that same frequency that we're a part of, is through feeling, is through metaphor, is through humor, is through love, is through nothingness. This is the language, is through music. That's the language of what this stuff is, in my opinion.
For the listeners, I'm smiling because I really felt you there, or feel like I felt you there. Let's shift slightly and go back to something, which is the background noise of modern life, right? Like, and I use noise specifically. I think noise, despite how it has been used for older generations to characterize and label the music of younger generations, there's something about noise that, unless we can find music in it, is almost like, I'm just coming up with this for the first time. So I'm not really like, I'm not, planting my rod in the ground on this statement, but it's almost like the opposite of music in a way. We might find music in it, but noise doesn't have that thing to it. It feels like there's a background noise to life in the modern world, which is all of the crises that we kind of mentioned earlier, and the stuff that, interpenetrated your documentary, like these things that are happening in the world, the music, the mushrooms, they're happening in the context of this background noise, which for myself, it rises and falls in perceived intensity, but it kind of exists as an ongoing kind of hum, maybe of dread, and at its like sort of most neutral, it's something like a low level dread that's almost just like an itch that sometimes is really bothersome that I can't seem to scratch, and other times I've just kind of learned to accept that it's there. It can take other emotional themes and such, but I guess like I'm trying to lean towards, like, when we talk about music, ceremony, connections, love, like all of these things happen in context. In the context of the human species right now, and thus all of the ceremonies, all of the deep listening experiences, all the moving encounters that happen with your music, or music of similar, like consequence for people, is happening in the background of our world state. What do you see? Like, do you see that as well? Or is there another way that you would characterize it? Or do you see something totally different that's happening in the world right now? And on top of that, I want to add two questions. So, what do you see as happening in the world right now? And the two questions on top of that is like, well, what is the value of music now? What is the value of psychedelic experiences now?
Well, it's a lot there. Maybe in reverse, the role of the psychedelic experience now is to help people wake the fuck up so that they can make the changes that are necessary to make in their own lives that plays a critical way in the way positive change happens in this world. It happens a person at a time. That's how change happens. It's not just an idea out there that comes from the top down. So there's a calling out there for each of us to participate from the inside out into action in the world. Now, we have to be careful not to get stuck into the self-aggrandized delusionistic state where it just turns into like an Instagram thing, like you said, where people reaching out to you is like, now you can make more money and get more followers. Like, that's a dead end where you're getting stuck in. It's a very difficult conundrum that we face, because on one hand, like plants coming through cracks in the concrete, it's inevitable and it's happening. Like, the concrete is old, it is breaking apart. That in a sense is inevitable. We're just propping things up over and over and over again. Going back to 2008, just a very recent thing of when I was referencing when the financial crisis occurred, not much has changed in the back end of banking laws and systems. No one really went to jail for that. So we're still in like that same situation. And then, we have environmental. I mean, I think about how we're about to get into wildfire season here. I live in the West, and it's like, it's terrible. The smoke in the summers. I didn't have them when I was growing up. Maybe once a summer that might happen. That's now the way it is. I mean, I don't have to go through all the crises from well, I won't even go through it. It's a poly crisis. And I think
Hmm.
we're all aware of a lot of them. And you throw AI and information on top of all of this, and then it's a whole another level.
Sure. And the collapsing of sort of like cultural structures of meaning as all of that just goes into the blender
Truth.
of,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's not even a collective truth anymore. I mean, it's truly, on many ways, it's in essence, it's like it's breaking down right in front of our face in a way that is apocalyptic, that it makes sense in a strange way. It's like, well, if it's going to break down so that something else can take its place, that's happening, right? Like, and I think a lot of things do need to change and break down. I mean, there's been many, many systems that just weren't working and were deeply oppressive and based on all sorts of oppression in the first place. And we couldn't continue in that story in that way. That was very much a story of like, everything's cool. We'll just keep growing. Don't worry about it. We'll just get more debt, whatever it is. We'll invent our way out of it. They, quote unquote, will figure it out. That's not working anymore. And then you throw in sort of the deeply destructive collie-like figure that is Donald Trump. I mean, my God, we could talk hours just about what's going on there on any different level, but in a strange way, like seems to be playing a role of like just burning it down, which I don't want. But then there's this other feeling in you, like, but I also don't want us to just like, well, if you could snap your fingers and it was like, we're literally like where we were, whatever, even 10 years ago. And it's just like that. We'll just keep on. It's like, well, we know that was a dead end too. It's just maybe it would buy us more time and it felt peaceful. I am no way a supporter of what Trump is doing. I think it's callous and disgusting and cruel and stupid most of the time. So I mean, if anything, I want change and I want it in the way of the least suffering. But I also know in human nature, we typically only change when we're forced to. It's usually a near-death experience, a bankruptcy, uh,
A divorce.
and all of that's
Sure. Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
collectively in our
Right.
society. If you think about it, right, we're about to go bankrupt, and we're kind of going through a divorce on cultural levels, and then social media, I've talked for a long time about how the role of the iPhone and what it's done to our minds. And I think it's played a big, big role in our polarization and the way we pull in information and how that's really changed our brains and the tribalism we're experiencing on many levels. Like many people, for instance, these days have platforms that should not have platforms, but they have them because of the mechanisms of how we're amplifying attention and grabbing it. And it becomes like a Ouroboros where the most outrageous, ridiculous things grow, even
And
though they're not.
that doesn't even speak to just, Marshall McLuhan, a sort of famous Canadian thinker. Terence McKenna used to talk about him a lot. Would say like the medium is the message. There's a whole other level of how the medium of checking our phones and social media and stuff, like the very structure of attention that it sort of catalyzes and requests becomes the quality and patterns of attention with which we show up to our entire lives, and thus all of the behaviors that come out of that, which is, like when we talk about deep listening or active listening, it's like the opposite of that. Like, what kind of lives can we live? What kind of relationship can we have with each other and with the world if the sort of the basic functions of awareness are being defined by the patterns of attention that are being engendered in us and neurologically set into our perception that social media and swiping and doom scrolling and 3-second videos, that what it does to us.
Yes. uh, Look, I don't know if you were into the whole 2012 thing. It's sort of at this point almost old school, but
Oh,
like there was this.
I was in. I was all the way.
Yeah. All right.
I
Well,
was
for
all the way
those
in, man.
super cliff notes, this Mayan calendar, the Baktun, and the idea that we're about on 2012 on the winter solstice, we were switching into this new calendar, this new epoch essentially. And that is true according to that calendar we are. And so people expected a big change at that moment. And I think looking back, of course, the change would be generational. Like it would not just be one day. It's like that just marked when now you're heading in a, it's an in breath, out breath kind of thing. That was also around when the internet really started to take off as far as mobile speeds being fast enough where things like TikToks or videos, whatever was going on back then, became more viable. And we got much more like mobile focused and our attention became much more fragmented into smartphones. So in many ways, and everything else that's kind of happened since then, politically and socially and environmentally, it does seem like, look at it, it's like, yeah, it seems like we're absolutely in some new era. And as time wave zero, as McKenna would say, that we are moving towards some kind of concrescence. Just AI alone, we can say there's this supposed AGI thing. We're moving towards it. What all that means, we don't quite know. It's a very, very psychedelic concept to even think that we're getting closer and closer and speeding faster and faster. But I'm like, is there a point? Or is it just like you zoom in on that and from your point of perspective, like a spiral, it's just like, like we're moving in light speed on this earth almost, but here we are standing in stillness, So my point is something is coming. And I also sense, like you, this tidal wave rumbling in the distance, and almost like the alarms have sounded. Oh, there was an earthquake across the Pacific. The tidal wave's coming. We're like, well, the beach is pretty nice right now. but you tell me it's coming. I can feel it coming in the polycrises, just in AI alone, let alone in this. We're recording this, not long after the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. It's just that feels like a fire in the house, where it's like all these other things going on, all these philosophical ideas we're talking about, and it's like you got to put the fire out. It's just right next to us in a sense. Like, and this is our home, and we don't have that. We don't have the luxury. We have to do something about some of these fires, and yet there's multiple fires being lit all around us, and it's just challenging. I think it's very intentional. It's challenging to know what to do or where to start or we get caught up in this game of distraction where we're talking and fighting about the things that it's just like, it's taking us away from the other thing, and then the other thing, and then the other thing, and then the other thing. And I do believe there is a systematic dismantling happening that is not just random. It's attached to greed and stupidity on a lot of levels, but there seems to be additional layers to it where, for lack of a better description, like the American experiment is trying to be completely torn apart, perhaps, so corporate billionaires and others can take it over, maybe. I can't say exactly what's going on, but we can all have some guesses. And say what you want about the problems of America, and there are many, and the colonialistic energies and efforts that created it, and all the horrible things that made it what it is. It also has served a purpose, at least since World War II, certainly, as a kind of beacon on the hill in ideology for what democracy at least could be as a theory.
Right.
Or even as this really fucked up police thing in the planet that played a role, if ugly. Look, it's coming apart. It's like, so that post World War II era is changing. And so what that means or what that world looks like, we don't know, but I think it's going to be very, very continue to be even more rocky. And you add on the layers like the storms and the fires and the energy and the wars. Really, really difficult. Like coronaviruses. We're in for much, much more. Mm-hmm. So what role do psychedelics play in this? You're asking.
Yeah, I was going to say, because projections of where we're headed and what it all means and so forth aside, like the reality is the living experience of most people today, right now.
Yeah, well, it's important for us not these days. I feel like if we don't bring to the surface what's on the surface, at some point in the conversation, we're doing a disservice to the state of play. It's kind of like, just two guys talking about metaphysics. It's like, We have to ground it because fires are burning. And so the psychedelics are truly can be a medicine potentially for people to reconnect in ways to those parts of themselves, to remember what's really important, what those North Stars are, and help hopefully give them motivation to take those courageous and brave steps into the world, to say what they need to say, to join forces with people and be more cooperative, to understand like even the othering is an illusion. I don't like, I don't want someone like Trump or whoever else, to die or to be like tortured. That's not my desire. I just don't want us to be hurting each other. It's like it's not about hate. It's just about waking up to like true long-term thinking beyond a generation of like ourselves and like this week or this year or this quarter, but really like 7 generations from now, that kind of thinking, like beyond yourself. What kind of world do you want to live in? We live in a world where people are like, they don't care. They're like, well, I want to know like what I can get out of this or what my future looks like. And I mean, you could look at it that way and say like, well, the best way to do that is together. I mean, that would be your best future, especially now. And so I'm hoping psychedelics, in a sense, can wake people up to love and to connection to other people. And then they can make changes and be bold and have that bravery to take those steps in their life, because we're going to need people who know what it means to have their feet on the ground moving forward, who are not just freaking out and reacting and being just completely triggered all the time. And we need people who can then have the leadership, or at least take turns doing it, because you can't do it all the time, to say like such and such is possible. We can do this. Yes, I'm willing to be in solidarity with something that might seem very hard or even impossible, incredibly nascent, but I'm going to play a participatory role in helping the becoming become, because it's the only way it can happen. And there will be more and more and more noise, more distraction, and more fires burning around us. And I do think it is a deep and important and valuable skill, and an admirable, difficult skill, to be able to have your feet on the ground and be clear-eyed at times when all of that is happening. So it's like if you can practice that now, and psychedelics is one way you can potentially drop into some of these things and really feel them and okay, but then it has to go away. You come down from the high and you're back here on campus Earth. We're supposed to be here. This is the point. We're supposed to be human facing things. And so everyone that's alive today feels like a brave soul to me, because let's just take on the idea that we chose to be here at this time. So if you chose to be here just as a thought experiment, then you must be a pretty brave person, because you're like, yeah, I want to be part of the ultimate show in the universe, potentially. This is it. This is like, we're at the crux. And are we going to make it? Are we going to thread the needle? But the last thing I'll say on this is like, if you were to design this situation, like you're quote unquote God, and you're like, this is how it is going to happen. Why wouldn't you make it the most suspenseful, crazy, multi-layered, multifaceted, like of everything going on at once, where maybe we eke out the last bit, like Luke Skywalker kind of thing? I mean, that's how you would do it, because that's the most novel and beautiful. So in that way, there's hope, but it requires your participation.
I want to, just 45 seconds ago, you said something to the effect of, like the noise is going to get louder and louder, and like going into the psychedelic experience and sort of like being inspired, getting back into connection and coming back with your feet on the ground. And I'm thinking back to you saying like, we're all musicians, like we can all sing, and there's also a dance in how we listen. And I'm kind of like bridging this together, which is like the noise is going to get louder and louder. And like the value is to make music there. And I mean that in the most figurative way possible, but also literally to make the music of how we dance with each other, how we meet each other in our feelings, both positive and negative, how we collaborate to build something beautiful that is a beauty other people can be affected by and step into. And that, psychedelics maybe can help us sort of have a sense of what that could look like, or at the very least give us a capacity to touch it within ourselves, such that we could then later learn to cultivate those feelings in our actions and behaviors in ourselves, such that our actions and behaviors can be expressions of those things, and maybe find and create resonance in those feelings with others as well. Also possible delusion and
Well,
self-aggrandizement
no,
and all the rest
I
too. But
think they absolutely can. They have that potential, and we also know that they have for millennia. So I mean, they play an important part in humans figuring out how to be human and to work through things. We know that. So just that that's happened for so long, and really only in recent history here, it'd be pretty silly to think like, oh, well, it's not relevant now. You know, of course it is. It's just a tool. But weaving the integrity of that tool, it makes sense to learn from how they've been used in smart and effective ways in the past, or way, way, way long past, that are so they don't get caught up in sort of the trappings and the tricks of modernity and technologies and ways. Not say it's a difficult weaving. It takes nuance.
I would this comes up a lot actually when you said they're a tool. I like to differentiate. I don't think the psychedelics are tools. I mean, I'm not sure about the straight chemical ones. I'm jury's still out in my mind on this, but say the mushrooms, the ayahuasca vine, the cacti, they're not tools to me. They're beings. The ceremonies are the tools. Like that's where the technology is for us to meet and dance and learn from and honor and have revere and be touched by and all the rest of these other beings. And that the tools are in our manner of approach and the skillfulness of the approach and what we do with it, but not necessarily the psychedelics themselves. I'm more animistic in that sense.
Yeah, I like that.
So this is kind of like we're going back more metaphysical. We just took like a really big, maybe like best effort at this time bite out of a huge apple that is perhaps a portion of it rotten. But like of what we just tried to cover in the last, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And I want to bring us towards that grounding that you mentioned, like getting our feet on the ground. What do you feel is the most important lesson that the mushrooms have offered you? I'm sure there's many, whichever one comes to mind now. And then how do you live that lesson? Like how have you learned to live this lesson in your life?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I have a lesson. I know it has something to do with trust. I mean, I think that's all I can say.
Hmm. Okay. I'm going to just trust on that. I was like, okay, great. I'll sit back now for a second. He's going to have some really cool thing to say. I'll be able to just bask in it, and that'll create the segue to the next question.
Well,
But it
I
also,
might honestly, my brain's probably getting a little mushy anyway. It's been a good combo, but it's like I don't. I could make things up, but it's like I don't have a good answer there.
but also it's very similar to that sort of earlier when I asked you about like the intelligence. There is something there, like maybe there's a lesson, but then also sometimes it's hard to bring that in, especially if, it sounds like you, like myself, the mushrooms and the psychedelic experiences, they have been around in my life for so long that it's hard to sort of explicitly identify what was the big lesson because it's how I live now. I'd have to go back and try to be like, what was the thing that really got you into so on and so forth when you were 15 or
Yeah, and
16, right?
again, it feels like I'm doing a disservice to the mushrooms. It feels reductive in a way that isn't maybe helpful. A
Mm.
lot of times I've said this to folks that the story we tell about our experiences often becomes the experience. And so it's important to be careful about what that story is you're crafting. Um, and so, if anything, I've said many things over the years that parts of me are wanting to say less. And that's, lean into the music more because it's not as defined.
Mm.
It's open.
All right. So I want to end asking you questions specifically about your documentary. Um, But maybe I'll finish with this question. We kind of talked about it a bit throughout the course of it when you were talking about like the different ways in which psychedelics can kind of be sort of contorted to fit into this sort of consumer capital machine and the profit driven motives and such. But there's a lot happening right now in the world when it comes to psychedelics. For you, when you look at the sort of various ways that access to the psychedelic experience is kind of blossoming in a multiple generations of people right now, is there hope for you there, concern, or both?
Both. But I think I remember a long time ago talking about with people that when it starts to become more mainstream, that there are going to be mistakes and missteps and things that are gross, but it's inevitable. But I also think it's inevitable that it weaves more into our life and into our culture because it was that way. So it'll take some time to find its footing. And that's already started to happen, like this big expansion that we're in sort of a contraction. But I think the cat's out of the bag. So it's a process that's unfolding at this point.
So let's finish with music for mushrooms in the literal sense of the name of your documentary. Who did you make this documentary for? Like, I guess we'll double that down. Like, what is this documentary for? And who is it for?
I made it largely for people who are a little bit curious, so they're a little bit on the periphery of the scene, so to speak. People who are in the scene, in the tribe, whatever you want to say, they tend to really like the film. And that's great. And that makes sense to me. But I was like, I don't want to only make it for those people. I want to make it so we can kind of reach across the aisle a bit. And it's people who have maybe heard or read Michael Pollan's book, or they've been read an article, or they have like a cousin or someone who's like was talking to them about this, but there's still some skepticism. And so we kind of wanted to like bring people in, and we were hoping that anyone could see themselves in the film somewhere. And in that way, they could feel like it's speaking to them in a relevancy to their life. And it's not just me saying my story, but we really worked hard, and there's a diversity of different types of people in there. And we're also not saying much in there that you can really argue with. It's just people sharing feelings and experiences and difficulties in their lives, and this interplay between that and doing inner work. And hopefully in there, you feel inspired to take whatever that next step is for you.
And where can people watch Music for Mushrooms, at least at the time of recording?
musicformushrooms.com. Or if you go to eastforest.org, it'll take you over there. So it's just hosted there right now. And you can, I think currently it might be $10 or something, but we still have plenty of money to make back. It was a rather expensive film. So we appreciate everyone's support and just like helping like make this a real mycelial movement of telling your friends or sharing it yourselves, or maybe hosting your own watch party. And we love hearing people's responses.
Well, I can say, I can speak confidently and truthfully that it was a really impactful documentary for me. I really appreciated it. I was really moved by it. And I've also really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you today and talk about the documentary, just talk about music and life. And it's been a really positive experience for me. So thank you, East Forest. Thank you for coming on to Adventures Through the Mind.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun and nice to meet you.
And cut. Okay. That was episode 201 of Adventures Through the Mind. If you liked it, of course, subscribe to the show, engage it online in some way, leave a review, throw me a tip. Love that. World unfortunately does in many ways run on money, and that is also how I eat and pay the bills. So that kind of support would be fantastic. If you are curious more about East Forest's work, I have included a link to his November tour, to Music for Mushrooms, to his album with Ram Dass, to once it's released, his new Guided Journeys album, and Lovingly, which was the album that we spoke about in the interview today. So check all of that out. Links to that will be in the description to this episode. I think East Forest's music is just so beautiful and totally worth your active listening. So go check it out a little bit at least. And that's all for this interview. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. There is a deluge of content out there, and I know that the podcast that I make here, the podcast that you as an active listener are part of the creation of, is not one that is easily enjoyed passively. I know that even paying attention to this asks a lot, and it's long. And if you're listening to this now, you made it all the way to the end and you're still listening. And that truly, genuinely is a gift. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you again on the next episode of Adventures Through the Mind. And until then, take care and stay curious.